Hi, Tim here from The Tiger. Now, today we're taking you back about 8 years to 2014. A couple of mysterious backpacker murders on the island of Koh Tao in the Gulf of Thailand. Now, at the time, the investigation that followed and the trials and the eventual convictions made a lot of people ask a lot of questions about what on earth was going on Koh Tao. And it was followed up by another sort of series of strange disappearances and murders on the island. Now, the island sort of gained a reputation at the time for being a bit of a mystery island. One of the persons writing about that was Sue Buchanan, Sue, who is writing for the Samui Times. Now, since then, she's had to leave the country, and we'll get her to explain a bit more about that. And she's written a book called The Curse of the Turtle. So I'd like to welcome Sue Buchanan all the way from London to the Tiger YouTube channel. Sue, firstly, why are you there and not here?
Oh, why am I not in Thailand anymore?
Yeah.
That'll be because there's an arrest warrant out for me in Thailand for publishing a story about a poor young woman who was raped on Koh Tao.
So is that arrest warrant still current?
As far as I'm aware, it's still current. Yeah, I've never actually seen the arrest warrant, but the British Embassy told me in 2018 that it was there, it was active, and as far as I'm aware, it's still active. So,
and you're not going to test it?
Won't be coming home anytime soon.
Sure. Interesting you still say the word home, though.
Yeah, well, I still have a house in Koh Samui, and having spent nearly 20 years in Thailand, it's kind of in my blood. So I think while the house is still there, it will always feel like home. But it's been a while since I've seen it now.
So here we are some, 8 years after the fact. The high-profile murders of Hannah Withridge and David Miller back in 2014 and the events that followed there started you on this trail. What is it about the island of Koh Tao?
I'm not sure about, when Zorlin and Wei Pure were arrested for the murders of Hannah and David. I went to see them in the prison and I was struck by how tiny they were, how apparently innocent they seemed. I was very concerned that they had allegations of torture, which is why they said they confessed to the murders. They had no prior criminal history. They were arrested a couple of weeks after the murders, after someone else was implicated by the first policeman, Panya Mayman. He was taken off the case and someone else was put on. They didn't appear to me to have any motive, and even though they're not, formally educated, I thought it seemed kind of crazy they'd stuck around on the island for 2 weeks. If they'd have done that, if you're from Burma, why wouldn't you just go home? So started looking into what was going on there, and then we had so many more suspicious backpacker deaths on the island. The story just kind of unfolded, and the amount of deaths seemed disproportionate. And the common theme was that the families of the victims of Koh Tao were not happy with the investigations, and that was across the board. So that's really what started, me on this trail of what really happened there. Because if it was nothing suspicious, why is nobody satisfied with the investigation of the death of their loved one?
So, Sue, obviously just needing to tread a little bit carefully, but if it wasn't the young Burmese gentleman, and who did all these investigations lead to? Or did the investigations lead nowhere? I mean, you weren't the only person sort of checking on this and investigating. There's been other lawyers who have been checking on this story over a number of years in great detail. But are the arrows all pointing to the same direction?
The arrows all point to the fact that none of it makes sense. From my experience of a journalist, if you can't make sense of a story, you've either got the wrong information or you don't have all of the information. That there is just no plausible explanation as to what's gone on here for any of the families. I mean, I spent a lot of time with the victims' families in the UK, specifically Pat Harrington, who is the mother of Ben Harrington. She was very shocked to discover that the British autopsy bore no resemblance to the Thai autopsy. So that was interesting. I've been spending a lot of time with Boyne Annesley, who is the father of Christina Annesley. He was very shocked to discover the last person who saw his daughter alive was never tracked down or interviewed by the police. So he found that very frustrating. I know Sarah Cotton very well. She's the mother of Luke Miller. And we have photographs of his injuries. He was meant to have drowned in a swimming pool, but the injuries in the autopsy just don't that story just doesn't add up either. And obviously, Tracy Pearson has always been very confused as to what happened to her son Nick, because again, the autopsy report doesn't tie into his injuries and the explanation of his death.
So in your book, The Curse of the Turtle, and we should mention it's available at Amazon from today. We'll put an address under this video so people can purchase it at their will. But how many cases did you actually end up putting all together under the mysterious murders on Kotow heading?
I mean, quite a few. I mean, I cover Nick Pearson, I cover Ben Harrington. Obviously, I do a lot of, investigation into the murders of Hannah and David, because there's a massive amount of information.
Yeah.
Obviously, talk about Luke Miller, Christina Annesley, and then the poor French guy, Dimitri Povs, who was found hanging in his bungalow. We've got Hans-Peter Sustrun, that supposedly was a dive master, which means he's a strong swimmer, and yet he got taken off, in a snorkeling accident off Syrie Beach, which is pretty shallow, and there's not too much in the way of tides there or currents there. So I cover those, and obviously I cover the rape of the young woman that caused my arrest warrant to come out. So I go into those in quite deep detail.
So could it be a possibility that all these people just came to misadventure? I mean, young people on a tropical island in a foreign country, it's not always going to go smoothly.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with that. And, unfortunately, people die all over the world, and young travellers, do die through misadventure. But the difference is here that the police investigations are either inadequate, or the reports they've given just don't add up. They don't stack up. The cause of death doesn't stack up. So I think, I'm not saying there's a serial killer running around Kotow. I'm saying the police are not diligently investigating these cases, because on our investigations, there's massive holes in what they're expecting the families to believe about the demise of their kids and their loved ones. So I think, that's a problem.
Now, one of the big issues that came up during the trials of the two young Burmese gentlemen in relation to the murders of Hannah Withridge and David Miller was the DNA evidence. Do you go into a lot of the discussion over that?
I do go into a lot of the DNA evidence, because for one, there was no DNA. Their DNA was not found on the murder weapon. There was DNA on the murder weapon, but it didn't match Wei Pure and Zaw Lin. And the other thing that I was really concerned about is that on the judgment day, the judge said that they were being convicted and sentenced to death on a 100% DNA match. Now, the DNA that was taken from Hannah, that's Hannah's DNA, that's Zaw Lin's DNA, that's Wei Pure's DNA. That's a mixed sample. And I've studied DNA over the years, and there, you can't have a 100% match from a mixed sample. And DNA expert Jane Torpin has confirmed this and has done, interviews with the press to say that, you can't have a 100% match. It's scientifically impossible for that to happen. And DNA is not an exact science. It's not a fingerprint. It's just an indication as to who might have been there. So I find that deeply disturbing when the DNA, was the reason the judge chose to give them the death penalty. Although thankfully the king has obviously commuted their sentences to life, so they won't be executed.
But they're still in jail.
But they're still in jail, and I'm in touch with them, and they're struggling. I mean, it's very hard for them, and especially during the pandemic, they've not been able to have visits. They haven't seen representatives of the embassy. They haven't been able to do the normal things they would do in jail. At least get some exercise. So they are really, really struggling, and in October there'll be 8 years.
So apart from your book, The Curse of the Turtle, there's also a TV series on Netflix coming out?
Yeah, there certainly is. Some of the victims' families and I have been working very hard with a company called Blast. We did a lot of filming last summer, and Sky Crime are putting out Death on the Beach. That's coming out this Sunday, the 6th of March. It's available UK time at 2 a.m. to download as a box set, or it's on main viewing at 9 o'clock. So, and that also delves, into the suspicious deaths on Kotow.
Now, the moniker Death Island, who came up with that moniker?
Well, I was blamed for that, but actually,
Yeah.
I don't know who originally came up with that. I mean, I saw that in the press, and I reported that the island was now being referred to as Death Island, but I certainly was not the one who came up with that. But I did report that, on social media especially, it was being called Death Island, and there is now a Facebook page called Kotow Death Island that's run by Ian Yarwood. in Perth, Western Australia. But I mean, that I've certainly never called it Death Island. I've only reported that's what it's been called.
So, Ian, as you mentioned, Ian Yarwood, he's done a lot of work in the background. I imagine a lot of the discussions in your book, The Curse of the Turtle, has been in conjunction with Ian?
Really, with Ian, I mean, Ian really looked into the DNA after the boys were sentenced to death, and he looked at the governing body of the laboratories in Thailand, BLQS, and their governing body, APLAC and ILAC, and he did a lot of really, really good work. Unpicking the DNA and figuring it out, because it's a very, very complex subject. I mean, I've studied it for a couple of years, and it's very, very difficult. Ian's managed to track down a lot of people who've had problems on Koh Tao. A lady called Carla Bartel was attacked in the same spot with her companion a year before Hannah and David. So I've not really collaborated with Ian on the book. I've collaborated with the victims' families, but Ian did, provide really essential information on the DNA.
So without giving away any surprises in the book, do you actually name names or name who you think might be behind this reputation Koh Tao has?
I can't prove who's behind it, but there's certainly enough evidence in the book for the reader to make their own conclusion.
Okay, say no more. So to yourself, you were married to a Thai. Is your husband now living in Thailand or in London with you?
No, I divorced my Thai husband before any of this ever happened. So it's interesting, actually. Some people have said that the only reason that I'm following this story is because I wasn't able to stay in Thailand, my business failed, and my husband left me. Well, I divorced my husband way before any of this happened. My business hadn't failed. I was still doing pretty well. I had a house there, and I'm in no way bitter towards Thailand. I love Thailand. I miss Thailand. I think the Thai people are wonderful. And I think they're being let down in certain areas by, lack of proper, diligent investigation into deaths of young backpackers. And I suspect, the way some of the islands operate is less than legitimate. But I have no grudge against Thailand. My motivation is finding justice for the victims' families and trying to help Wei Pure and Zorlin, who I believe have been wrongly convicted of these murders.
Finally, Sue, if you had friends who were looking for a really nice diving spot in Thailand for a 2-week holiday, would you recommend they go to Koh Tao?
I'd recommend they read the book first and then make their own decision.
Okay.
But it's still a beautiful island, and I had amazing times on Koh Tao, and I had amazing times in Thailand, and I was made very welcome. But like most countries with the dark side, I just think Koh Tao it's a bit disproportionate.
Okay. Well, the book is called The Curse of the Turtle. We've been speaking to the author, Sue Buchanan. So we do thank you for your time today, and best of luck with sales of the book. And we can recommend it, even though I haven't even read it, because I know there's a fascinating story to be uncovered there. Sue, thanks for your time.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Have a good day.
Well, that was Sue Buchanan there, all the way from London, speaking to us about her new book, The Curse of the Turtle, which relates to not only the backpacker murders back in 2014 on Koh Tao, but some other mysterious disappearances and murders on the island. So if you'd like to catch up with that book, it's available at Amazon. We'll have a link in the description. Thank you very much for joining us here at The Tiger, and we look forward to seeing you next time.